Wow, welcome to the Wildcast. I'm your host, Canyon Allis, along with Gary Randazzo on the 24/7 Sports Network, WildcatSportsReport.com. We are the day after a monumental win for the Arizona Wildcats and the Rich Rod era. Arizona destroying is a word I've heard, upsetting is a word I've heard, manhandling, but either way, winning the big game last night against Oklahoma State, 59-38, even on some polls, as Gary Randazzo did write about earlier today. Arizona ranked 24th in the ESPN poll. Gary, so much going on. How you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Canyon. I think I'm as shocked as anybody right now.
Well, definitely been a crazy turn of events the last 24 hours. There's a lot of people starting to realize that not only is the Rich Rodriguez era underway, but if you're in the way, you better get out, because this Arizona team isn't going to play the rebuilding card, are they, Gary?
No, not even close. And not only that, I mean, I think what we witnessed last night, probably what stands out the most to me is the fact that this team just did not quit. I mean, this is a new team with a new philosophy and a new attitude, and so far the attitude's a winning one.
And it would have been really easy for this team to quit going down 14-0 early in the game, first two drives. Then they came back. It would have, in fact, there was a point where I thought, okay, shoot, they could be down 21-0 real quick. Game over. Okay, we have an easy win hopefully next week. Let's start focusing that. But not the case. As you said, they got stronger as the game went on. Arizona coming back in the first quarter, scoring 10 points. They scored a touchdown, 3 straight field goals. In fact, I think Arizona left some points on the board in that first half with those field goals. But nevertheless, the offense was relentless. Kadeem Carey added his mark with 26 carries for 126 yards, 3 TDs. Matt Scott looked like he had been starting the last 4 years with his game, as he had 28 completions out of 41 attempts, 320 yards, 2 TTs, and more important, no interceptions. He also added 55 yards on the ground. What was your thoughts on Matt Scott and the offense last night?
Oh, I thought Matt Scott, it's amazing to see the maturity level of this young man. He's a fifth-year senior, so I say that lightly, but some of the composure he's showing in the pocket. You know, Arizona's offensive line has dramatically improved from a year ago as they've aged as well, but, you know, Scott is still being pressured. I mean, you have to give a lot of credit to OSU's defensive line last night. They were big, they were fast, they were in Scott's face, and he just did a really nice job of stepping up into the pocket at times. He rolled out at times. You know, he's just a smart player, and I don't think it's something that, you know, Wildcat fans expected out of Scott. But he's delivering, and he's delivering in the clutch, which is really what matters most.
I think last night we saw that this team's running the option really, really well. I mean, they look like they've been doing it for years, along with Carey and the passing game. I think Matt Scott offers and brings some things to the table that Rich Rodriguez, looking at the quarterbacks he's had, he probably hasn't had a pure passer as good as Scott has since, I don't know, maybe Sean King in the Tulane days. So I think there's a lot of weapons at his hand, and I think last night we went to, really saw that. Another thing I liked, Matt Scott spread the ball around quite well. I believe 7 different players had a reception. So spreading the ball out well, it's really, really hard when you do that for defenses to bear down, especially because Oklahoma State last night really didn't have a whole lot to look at to be basing their scouting report on U of A's offense. I think that was one thing I really give Rich Rodriguez credit for. Last week against Toledo, he took a big gamble on not showing the offense, not doing things, working on things, so that he didn't show a lot to the Oklahoma State coaching staff. And as we saw what happened last week with them almost not winning the game against Toledo, that ended up being a calculated risk, and it ended up being one that paid off, as the offense scoring 17 points in the regulation last week, coming out and scoring 59 against a defense that, if you looked at it at face value, should be a lot better than Toledo's defense. Which of the two, Gary, do you think is a real U of A offense? I mean, do you think it's going to be one that's going to score 59 points every week?
I'm kind of getting the feeling it's going to be the type of offense that does what it has to do, regardless of points on the board. I mean, one thing I really like from Arizona, you hinted about the 14-0 start by Oklahoma State. I don't know if there's a fan in Tucson right now that thought Arizona was going to come back from that. And impressively, they scored the 30 unanswered points to go 30-14. But what I think is even more impressive is the fact that once the Cowboys cut the lead to 30-28, Arizona put another 29 points on the board from the 3-minute mark of the third quarter on. And to that point, it seemed like Rich Rod's offense, they didn't even show much in the first quarter against Oklahoma State, but slowly but surely as the game progressed, the offense started to open up. I mean, the second half, Kerry scored on a running back screen, which is something that we really hadn't run yet this season. So I think Rich Rod's offensive genius, say that right now, has been impressive, and I think Arizona, despite popular belief, actually does have the offensive weapons to have a versatile offense and to do some things when they're facing adversity.
Well, I know I was saying this last night, and I've been skeptical of the Wildcats of Rich Rodriguez, just because of the way things have went the last couple of years with the Stoops era coming to an end. It seemed as if things were, I don't want to use the word dysfunctional, but not right in the Arizona program. Rich Rodriguez comes in. We know about his dysfunctionality at Michigan and West Virginia and the way things with that. He comes in. A lot of question marks around the program, a lot of question marks around Rich Rodriguez. Naturally, there's just going to be question marks when those two things come together. Well, I think this team is a lot better as far as talent-wise than we thought. And B, I think that, to his credit, Rich Rodriguez, and I want to throw Jeff Castile's name in there as well because of how good the defense did look at times. I mean, giving up 37 points, but really, or 38 points. But 14 of that was, before they really got their bearings down. So, with all that said, I think that this team could be a lot better than originally thought.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the old adage of, slowly or steady wins the race, whatever it is, doesn't necessarily apply in college football. And I say that because you look at teams like Oregon, you look at even Oklahoma State, at times it's really just the team that's willing to make the big play at the right time, and that goes on both sides of the ball. I mean, we flip the script. Oklahoma State had 636 yards of offense. Arizona only had 501. Usually it's the other way around, and Arizona's the loser, but the big yardage gainer. But last night it was all about the team that made the big plays at the right time, and that was Arizona finding its way into the end zone when they had to. And it was creating those 4 turnovers on defense. I mean, we've heard quotes from Castile saying, it's not about yardage, it's about stops. And we've also heard Rich Rod talk about just this never quit type of attitude. It just seems to me that the entire philosophy within the program has changed from the Stoops era so far. And players are believing. And sometimes in college football, when guys are so young, it doesn't matter the opponent. If you've got, 11 guys on the field believing as one, that's powerful stuff. And we witnessed that last night.
I think you're absolutely right. One thing I noticed, especially on the sideline of the Toledo game, was watching the players warm up, and I just noticed a different sense of camaraderie amongst the players. And I think that's something that's huge coming from a player's standpoint, is you will play differently when your colleagues and your peers have your utmost respect. You'll lay it on the line. You'll dive for that pass, or lay at the bottom of a pile and not let go, or go that extra mile when you feel that your counterparts will do the same for you. And I think that's one thing that Rich Rod has done a good job with the players. And I mean, if you look at just the penalties alone, look how disciplined the players seemed on the field. I mean, if you wouldn't have known any better, you would have thought Oklahoma State was the team that had the first-year coach and changed the system, and their offensive line couldn't get it together cohesively and stuff like that. I mean, look at the penalties alone. I mean, they set records for their school and penalty, just yards alone. So I think really U of A showed how disciplined they are and they can be. And that's going to be huge going down the line when this team faces some adversity and keeps their composure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at the penalty disparity. Oklahoma State had 15 for 167 yards. Arizona had 4 for 27. Again, just going to where the program was trending in the Stoops era, those numbers were flipped. I mean, Arizona, I think, was second to last in the the Pac-10 in 2011 with 2010 with most penalties, and it just seems like suddenly overnight everything has changed, and that may or may not translate to future wins over. We're going to be playing number 4 Oregon here coming up, and who knows what's going to happen in that game. But I think fans have to be positive right now going into this season because this is just a different team with a different mindset.
Well, and you're right, and I think that's happening, especially in the state of Arizona. We joked earlier before the show, Gary, that there's a lot of Kool-Aid being drank in the state of Arizona right now. In the Phoenix region, ASU playing great last night, beating Illinois, of course, Arizona beating Oklahoma State, and the little guys up north, NAU, beating UNLV in a last-second field goal. So there's a lot to be happy about as far as football goes in the state of Arizona. Definitely a different mentality this year, coming out of nowhere, basically. As you look at its multiple, almost dysfunctional programs over the last 10 years, are now a serious threat in the Pac-12 South, as it would appear. Obviously, a lot of football left to be played and a lot of storylines to be developed, but it looks like both Arizona and Arizona State could be some serious contenders going on. Well, another thing I want to bring up, the other half of, we talked about the offense, is the defense. The defense started the game a little iffy, giving up 14 straight points really quickly, 2 quick TDs, both on Shaq Richardson. And then, obviously, Jeff Castillo made some adjustments because from that point on, it was a different game, Gary. The defense tightened things up, didn't give up the big plays. In fact, they were the ones making the big plays. What were your thoughts about the defense last night, Gary?
I thought it was interesting. I mean, you bring up Shaq Richardson, and, he's kind of a riverboat gambler type, so it's going to be frustrating at times. But he also made some incredible pass breakups last night, some really good stops in the running game. He's a solid player. I think over time we may see Castillo kind of protect him over the top with a safety or another secondary player, just to allow Shaq to be that aggressive type that jumps the routes. Overall, defensively, though, I think what's impressing me the most right now is just team tackling. OSU broke for some big plays. They were getting a lot of protection for Lunt for the majority of the game, and he had a lot of time to throw. And even on a 20-yard gain, it seemed to me for the most part that upon first contact with the Wildcat, Arizona was bringing down guys, which in seasons past we've seen a lot of missed tackles, a lot of poor technique. So I think that's a big change right there. And then you just got to love Castillo, the way he operates with Rodriguez. I mean, the two, to me, through the first 2 games, seem as if they're comfortable allowing the opponent to do something and just kind of set him up. And I think the perfect example of, was Castillo trying to figure out how to blitz on Oklahoma State in that third quarter when the game was kind of getting away from Arizona. And then early in the fourth, he dials up that perfect blitz, gets pressure on Lunt. He throws a wobbly pass to the sideline, and, McKnight steps in front of it and pick 6 in stride. So, I think as a fan watching the game, it's going to be difficult at times because we're going to see some decisions that we may or may not agree with. But I do get the sense that Rodriguez and Castillo are looking at the game in a 60-minute window. And, it's just going to be a big play type of team on offense and defense. And we just got to hope the big plays outweigh giving up yardage and things of that nature. And then so far it's worked. So, who's to complain?
And I think you're right. And I like how you use riverboat gambler. And I think that can be said for a lot of what Rich Rodriguez and Jeff Castillo is doing. You see them jumping a lot of routes. And look, here's the deal. McKnight has that interception, 48-yard interception return for a touchdown. He jumped that out route, okay? That's the same thing that's, Shaq Richardson had been doing. When you do that, you are going to have big plays. You are going to, if you hit that out route and you pick that ball off, 9 times out of 10, it's a touchdown. Having that being said, you're also every once in a while going to give up a big play. Hopefully you have safety help over the top. If you don't, it's a guaranteed touchdown. like you said, there's give and take in that, and I think you're right. I think they do look at it as a 60-minute ball game, and there's going to be ups and downs, wins and losses within the game as you go along. But I think that their game plan for this game was great. They made some adjustments, obviously the appropriate adjustments, as they outscored Oklahoma State really 59-24 after those first 2 touchdowns that they gave up quick. And the biggest thing, like you said, is tackling. I remember last year and the year before, fellow staff writer Brad Allis, we would sit in the press box and we would have a little tab of paper and we would tally up the missed tackles. And it would always be 7 to 10 a game. I mean, that's how noticeable it was, and we'd be so frustrated. I don't even recall last night very seldomly being angry because it was such an obvious tackle that could have been made that wasn't. So definitely that's a thing that is coaching driven. That's fundamental football, and that's something that really you don't think about, but that's something that needs to be taught at every level.
I agree. And, Arizona's defense was stout at times last night. I mean, in the second quarter alone, OSU only gained 79 yards of offense. And that's when we scored the 23 points to take the lead at halftime. I mean, everything was going great. Some adjustments were made at halftime. You got to give a lot of credit to Oklahoma State. They had 224 yards of offense in the third quarter when they came back. And then, Arizona kind of got it back together again in the fourth and had some timely defensive plays that we talked about. But like you said, too, I mean, the gambling style is so great for Arizona fans just because it really brings back memories of the Desert Swarm in the 1990s. I mean, those guys were clearly a better defense than today's defense right now as of today. However, similarity between the two is the fact that both gambled a lot. I mean, flying to the football, and how many pass deflections did Arizona have last night that really disrupted some of the flow from Lunt and had him second-guessing himself a little bit. I mean, he threw 3 turnovers, and 2 of them were deflected passes, and the one is we talked about with McKnight. So I'm enjoying it right now. I mean, I honestly don't know what it means today, but so far so good.
Well, we won't know what it means for a few months, really. I mean, it depends on. We'll know how big of a game this is by what happens in the season. No matter what happens, it's going to be definitely a top 10er all time, in my opinion, just because of the magnitude of the Rich Rod era. But like you said, as far as the defense goes, a lot of comparisons to that Desert Swarm, in my mind, just on personality. Some really likable figures on this defense. I mean, Jared Tevis, I mean, that guy's one of my all-time favorite U of A football players. A walk-on, a hometown kid. Seems like he sniffs that ball out, makes some big hits. He did have a penalty, personal foul, I think, leading with his head, but from a coaching standpoint, I don't mind that penalty. If that guy's coming up and laying the hit, every now and then, you're going to get that penalty. But I guarantee the receivers are going to think twice about going over the middle. So over the course of a season, a few 15-yard penalties might actually save you some drops and big plays over the middle that the guy won't make because he's scared to get hit. Also, the versatility of Marquise Flowers. Really, last year, he was Arizona's best DB, in my opinion. Now playing linebacker. So you take your 3-3-5, and it's really almost like a 3-2-6 because you're really lining up 6 defensive backs on the field at all times, whether you call him a linebacker or a lot of times a strong safety will line up where a linebacker goes. And I think that just adds to the versatility of this defense where you can line a guy like Marquise Flowers, you can rush him, you have him rush the passer, to all the way to dropping back and playing free safety. So he's a guy who literally can line up anywhere on the field at all times. And that's really what the 3-3-5 is all about, is being so versatile with that extra defensive back. Well, now you kind of have 2 extra defensive backs, and that's something that's going to generate a lot of problems for offenses coming in and trying to play against this Arizona defense. So I really want to see how they'll react when they tighten things up and just get to know this system a little bit better. It'll be interesting to see. I'm looking at that Oregon game in a few weeks, how they react when they play an offense with the firepower that Oregon has. It'll be very exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, just, again, looking at the 636 yards of offense Oklahoma State put up, It could have been a different story last night had Arizona's defense not forced the 4 turnovers. So I think moving forward, you look at teams like Oregon, you look at teams like USC, Arizona's going to have to win the turnover battle just to be competitive in those games. And then if they play the way they did last night on offense, I mean, heck, they have as good a chance to beat those big schools as anyone. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Oklahoma State is a very good program. They are on the rise, heading into kind of a perennial BCS-type power. They won the Big 12 last year. I mean, this is a great, great win for Arizona. One quick thing to bring up, too, on some defensive nuances. Last night, what I noticed with weak side defensive end on certain plays, we were actually in a 2-man down lineman set with the weak side defensive end about 3 yards off the ball. Don't really know what that was all about, but I liked it, and it definitely seemed, just little nuances like that could have an impact on opposing offenses, make them think twice, especially during game field. I think a lot of teams this year are going to be wondering what Arizona's going to throw at them next.
You've been listening to the Wildcast on the WildcatSportsReport.com and on the 24/7 Sports Network. For Gary Randazzo, I am Canyon Allis. We'll see you. So long.